You want to be a polyglot. Lots of people online are doing it. You want to be one of them. How do you end up doing it? So what looks like a current fad, you've seen lots of videos of people being a polyglot, speaking 6, 7 languages. You see someone like me, another person just out there making videos about what they love, learning languages. This isn't a new trend or new fad. People have loved language for a long time. The author Tolkien would spend years of his time creating languages, studying philology, the Old Norse, Old English, Germanic languages, Finnish, and he just had an innate love for the sound, the musicality, the rhythm, the cultures, and learning about these languages. So I think that is something that not everyone has, but a small percentage of the population. We have this unexplainable love for language itself, the way it sounds. And that's what I've always felt. I've always wanted to learn a foreign language. And when I was younger, I never knew anyone who spoke multiple languages, but I always wanted to learn a foreign language. So I studied French. I studied abroad in France, did very well. I didn't do well in school necessarily, but I studied a lot. I would speak a lot, even though I wasn't necessarily great at it. Eventually, being in France, speaking with a lot of people, that continual drive, even though I wasn't good at mastering vocabulary or grammar rules, eventually it would just click. So in order to become, here's me at baseline. I spend, say, 6 years, travel to France several times, have French friends, take French from not speaking it at the bottom to very good fluency, understanding the little nuances in the language, how people use it, being able to understand, any movie I watch, or most of them. There's still some French. This isn't the roof. I can still definitely go improve my French, but be able to read literature and so on. From then, the next, learning a second Romance language is much easier. So for me, that was Spanish, which I spend a lot of time using now. It's probably the language I use the most in my everyday life. But the amount of effort that I took learning French compared to the amount of effort I took to learn Spanish, that's probably about accurate, is that half, maybe less than half the effort to get the same distance. Spanish has its own challenges, multiple different accents, latching onto a single culture, because there are multiple cultures within the Hispanic world and European Spanish. But those aside, I learned to communicate in Spanish well, much faster than I ever did in French. And then, for Italian, Portuguese, that I learned later, they also took less time, so maybe I never learned them quite as well, but they took less time. So that's the Romance family. But after learning French and Spanish, I had now learned 2 languages to a pretty high level. Maybe my Spanish was around here at this point in time. Hadn't yet learned Italian or Portuguese. But then I want to learn something completely different. I've had rapid success. I can speak Spanish pretty well after 1 year of study, and just was amazed by how quickly I picked it up, partially because I already had experience learning French, but also partially because, or largely I think, because the languages are similar, so it's just easier to pick up more vocabulary. Now I'm learning Russian. Some maybe similar vocabulary, like sidewalks, trottoir, or biblioteca for library, but in general very different vocabulary. Despite that, I still won't require the same amount of time, even though it's farther from English. It still will be much quicker because I know how to learn a language. I know how to learn grammar. I know a lot more about grammar from learning different languages. Now I've acquired a talent for learning a language that I didn't have when I was learning French, but I do think I have when I'm learning Russian, and was able to take less time in order to learn Russian to a good level. And now that my Russian's decent, I still will probably improve my Russian a little bit more before I try learning Polish or Serbian or any other language. But let's say Polish is probably the next Serbian language that I'd like to learn. I guarantee that it will be much easier to learn Polish. Same thing with German. So German probably a little bit easier than learning Russian, so a little bit higher. It's probably a little bit more like this, the base. But I was able to learn it quicker because I had experience learning other languages. And then Dutch, which I haven't learned yet, but I think Dutch would be easy. I plan to learn it someday. So this is how you end up being a polyglot. There's no magic trick to it. You're not necessarily good at language. It's just you put so much time learning your first language. Your second one, you then get confidence, a lot of positive feedback, and then you take on a real challenge. There was a point in here that I kind of thought I'd never learn Russian, that I still was like, oh, feels so different. It's so hard. And everyone feels this. It's easier to push past that wall when I've had success before, when I know that if I keep doing this, I will learn it. It seems impossible, it seems very hard, but I know I can get through this. Whereas other people who are learning it as their first language, it can be hard to get past that. You may just give up. I'll never be able to do this. And then, learning similar languages are much easier. Right now I'm trying to learn Chinese. I've studied it for many years. I've had difficulties. My Chinese sucks, quite frankly. But I've had success with European languages. I know I can do it. I just have to find the time and push through it. So, to make a long story short, that is how you become a